Welcome to Sanguine Arts Locavart, the podcast that features interviews with local Twin Cities artists. This activity is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a grant from the Metropolitan Regional Arts Council, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. I'm your host, Mary Prescott, interdisciplinary artist, composer, and pianist. Today, we are speaking with Dameun Strange. Dameun is a sound artist, multi-instrumentalist, and musicologist, a storyteller who loves working with sound. Welcome, Dameun.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah,
Happy to
thank
be
you.
here.
Thank you for speaking with us today.
Absolutely.
When I begin these interviews, I usually share a short biography of the show's guest with the audience, but yours is so personal and autobiographical that I'd love to ask if you wouldn't mind reading it yourself.
Sure, I can do that. Thanks. Um, when you grow up in a multi-generational Black family, as I did in Washington, D.C. in the 1980s, you cannot help but be influenced by a broad spectrum of the Black experience. My great-great-grandmother, Mildred Lee Mayfield Warner, moved to D.C. with her only child, Alma Marie Williams Strange, to find work after living in South Carolina in the Deep South for most of her life. It was in D.C. where she would eventually purchase a row house in the Columbia Heights neighborhood that became our family home for 6 generations. As a child, matriarch Mildred was my living connection to the Deep South and the ancestors. The stories of her childhood and growing up in rural Great Falls, South Carolina, captured my boyhood imagination with their vividness. There was a beautiful Black Christian romanticism that also at times carried warnings like, be careful of white men like him, pointing to a portly, middle aged white man in a white t shirt so soaked you could see the layers of his white t shirt underneath. They'll take little Black boys like you. She once told me that as we sat in Lafayette Park. I never forgot that statement, even as my 5-year-old mind wouldn't fully understand this part of Blackness in America until into my adolescence, when I would get a deep introduction or education from my former Panther, from a former Black Panther and my uncle, Abdullah Sadiq, who was born Wallace Strange, who converted to Islam during a prison stint and found his way to a jihad against the Russians in Afghanistan. It's all in the music. When you're born and raised in a chocolate city like Washington, D.C. in the 1970s, you cannot help but be influenced by a broad spectrum of Black sound. My mom, Wendy Veronica Tucker, influenced me most. Blessed with a beautiful contralto voice, she loved horns and a beat. The sound I heard coming from my mom's hi-fi system, groups like Parliament Funkadelic, Earth, Wind and Fire, Ohio Players, and early Prince, her own band, Everyday People, practiced in the basement of her first home in Southeast Washington, D.C., and is where I actually happened upon my first synthesizer. Her brother Umar Farouk, who was born Joe Franklin Mean, would continue in my great-great-grandfather's Richard Chick Strange's footsteps as a drummer. He introduced me to the sounds of reggae, prog rock, and metal, and turned me on to the music and the compositions of Terry Lynn Carrington. It's all in the music.
Thank you so much. It's so beautiful. And it's a biography that I'm not used to hearing, that style. It gives such a vivid picture of your creative upbringing and the elders who influenced you. Um, could you share a little bit more about your early experiences encountering and making music?
Sure. As I said in my bio, I grew up in Washington, D.C. Um, and I grew up in a musical household. As I mentioned, my mom was a singer.
Mm-hmm.
And my family was very much connected to our church, Metropolitan AME, in downtown Washington, D.C., which had a pretty vibrant music department. So between that music and singing in the children choir and youth choirs, and listening to my mom's choir, well, not her own choir, but the choir she was in, the Metro Airs, which was more of a traditional gospel choir out of sort of that 70s gospel sound.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then um, I also was influenced by my great grandmother, who who introduced me to sort of classical music and jazz. And she's the one that sort of enrolled me in the DC Youth Orchestra program,
Mm-hmm.
and that was at age 5. That's when I started on viola. I had no idea what a viola was, but it was really my first formal instruction on an instrument. Um, I pretty much did that until I was not 9 years old, and I found my way to woodwind, which was a better fit for me. um, my church had a very, as I mentioned, very broad spectrum of music,
Mm-hmm.
from the gospel to like really high classical music, and Protestant hymns and and all of that. And one of the things that the church did every um, first Sunday in Advent was present Handel's Messiah.
Hmm.
And I think I was around 5 years. We were 5 years old then. Again, about the time I started in the DC Youth Orchestra program, when I heard that music, and that it was so big and so many voices and so many instruments and the people who were there to attend. I could tell that this was a very special occasion for them, and
Mm-hmm.
um, it really was that point where I was just like, I want to do that. I
Mm-hmm.
want to make people feel like that, or I want to make things for occasions like this. And
Yeah.
I think I really did kind of fall in love with music or sound at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow. And you're doing it.
I am. Yeah. I am.
You mentioned in your biography that your mom was the person who influenced you the most. Could you talk more
Mhm.
about that?
Yeah, so my mom, Wendy, she, she was in a band, and so because of her and a singer, and because of that, I really did have music around me all the time. Um, Once I was, I guess, in middle school, probably 12 or so, it's about the time I started playing saxophone or studying saxophone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, she was really excited about that. And at the time she was singing, she had a weekly cabaret show um, at a club not too far from our neighborhood. And it's probably about the time that Anita Baker's Rapture album was out, because she was singing a number of those songs
Mm-hmm.
on her set. Um, and there were songs that had saxophone solos on it. And she would bring me into her room, put the record on, and play the song.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we were still listening to records. This was actually kind of pre CDs, or around the early advent of CDs. We did not
Or
have a CD
cassettes.
player. Or cassettes. We did have cassettes, yes. But she would put the album on and play the song, and stop it and say, did you hear the saxophone
Mhm.
solo? Did you hear the saxophone line? And I was like, yeah, I heard it. And she's like, well, just listen to it again and just try to play it back the way they're playing it. And so we did that for pretty much all the songs on that album. And that was like the first, intro to me sort of learning that, sort of playing by ear on an instrument.
Mm.
Our choirs we were learning by ear. That was kind of the tradition in the church. But this was the first time I was doing that. I was so used to like having to read a note and play the note perfectly. Um, here I was just listening to what I heard and trying to reproduce that. So that had a big influence on me. And she was also the one that sort of saw my interest in writing music,
Mhm.
and taught me sort of simple, at least pop and soul, song arranging, and how to write songs and structure songs. So that sort of stoked the flames of songwriting, and then composition, and led to where I am right
Mhm.
now, I think,
Mhm.
in some ways. Yeah.
You also mentioned in your biography that when you got your first synthesizer. Um, could you share about your journey with electronic music and electronic improvisation?
Oh, sure. Well, it wasn't my synthesizer. It was my brother, my little brother.
Oh.
It was my little brother and I sneaking down into the basement where my mom's band was rehearsing,
Oh, I see.
and
Secret synthesizer.
and figuring out how to turn on a few things so that we can get sound.
That's so good.
Um, and I don't actually know which kind that it was. It was a Korg. I remember it was a Korg. That's
Uh-huh.
that's the only thing I remember, but I don't know what model it was back then. But I was fascinated with that. Pianos were something different. They produced like this tone that was very familiar, but this instrument could produce so many different sounds, and it helped me understand kind of what Earth, Wind, and Fire and Stevie Wonder were doing, the albums at my in Parliament,
Mhm.
how those sounds were being created, because that's
Mhm.
what fascinated me about those artists at the time. And I was born in '73, so this is Stevie Wonder's. My favorite album, Stevie Wonder's, is Inner Visions, and that's an album where he was really experimenting with those those room size synthesizers,
Mhm.
and those solos were so mesmerizing to me. And Bernie Worrell, um, in Parliament, all those sounds were like, I was just so fascinated of where they came from. Like,
Mhm.
I hadn't heard any instruments that could make those. And then I found out, oh, those are electronic instruments. Those
Uh-huh.
are synthesizers.
Uh-huh.
So, and then of course, um, coming of age at the, oh, I guess I'm the same age as hip hop, but coming of age when I guess it was coming of age
Mhm.
also meant listening to different types of music that um, in which all the sounds were being produced by electronics in some ways.
Yeah.
The DJs, turntables, or later like samplers and things like that. That was
Mhm.
the music we were listening to. And I'm still thinking of um, an album, a song that I really liked in middle school was Lisa and Cult Jam, "Take Me Home." And they had this like sample that was going through the song like the whole time, and I knew it wasn't them singing it.
Mhm.
It's like, how are they producing that sound? It was just like a little snippet of that voice. And so this is like listening to the music and being curious about the sounds that I was hearing in the pop music. Um, I wanted to figure out how to reproduce those sounds, and that's kind of what got me interested in electronic music.
Mhm.
My mom did buy me my first synthesizer,
Oh.
and I think I was like in ninth grade. And
Mhm.
it was a Casio SK1,
Nice.
and the cool thing about the Casio SK1, it was like basic PCM sample keyboard, but it had a sampler on it, so you could record things and then like pitch them up and down the keyboard,
Uh-huh.
and that was it. I was like, it was this tiny little toy.
This
It
is
was
for
basically a
me.
toy, but I was just like, this is what I've been wanting to do. And
My whole life has led up to this moment.
it did. And I was just like, yes, I have this in my hand. I have this in my hand now. And I really want to get one, just because it was the first one I had.
Yeah.
But other than that, we didn't have a lot of money in my family, so a lot, like spending money on instruments and things like that was a little frivolous. And aside from that keyboard, I had a lot of friends at the school that I attended, the Murray School, who had gear, and so I would, go to their houses and learn how to use a sampler or a drum machine, or and things like that. And so that's kind of how I got my education, is sort of teaching myself on other people's gear.
Ah,
Yeah.
that's a nice way to do like a communal,
Yeah.
like music library
Yeah.
or instrument library, which
Yeah.
we'll get to later.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah.
You recently released a new album, Light Falling Behind You. Could
Yeah.
you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Light Falling Behind You is a project that I spent a long time on. It's an electronic music album, would be the genre if I had to tag something on a distributor.
And we always do.
um, but it started probably about 6 or 7 years ago, and it was I wanted it to be a theme album, sort of about space travel. That's what I wanted it to be about, and sort of the loneliness of space travel, and because everyone, I think it's weird that a lot of the movies that most people like, popular movies, that don't depict the loneliness as much. There's some, like, what was the one that was? I think George Clooney was in it, and I can't remember, but it was very recent. I think it's about them being like literally lost in space outside the ship. But it all seems so exciting. But I really feel like, space travel, while exciting because it'll be new and fresh, but all adventure is really challenging, and
Yeah. Maybe
and
that freshness wears off after a month. You're
yeah,
like, "Wait,
yeah.
I'm stuck up here forever?"
Forever. Yeah. So this album was about this human who, so they, obviously this is in the future, and this human has been sort of modified. They've started modifying human for space travel, to, through sort of DNA, and experiments and things like that, and also sort of cyborg technology, android, and things like that. So Oni is this type of person, and has been doing this work for a long time, but something is happening with him, and he starts having these flashes of memories, and which is kind of like, well, which is disturbing him, and he's supposed to be doing his work, but he decides to go off on this other adventure, this detour, to try to figure out what these memories are, and maybe who he actually really is. And the memories have to do with this long lost love, or something like that, and so he's trying to put the clues together. But in the end, he kind of gets sucked into a black hole,
Whoops.
and then it transforms him, or I don't know, it transforms them into a different being.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what the album is about.
That's cool. That's really
Yeah.
cool. Um, this piece and your other work, and even your biography, could be considered forms of storytelling.
Yeah.
Could you tell us more about that and how and why storytelling feels so important to you and for BIPOC communities?
Yeah. Um, it kind of goes back to even the story of the beginning of my studies, and um, a lot of it being rooted in sort of the classical tradition, and then that sort of being the standard that I was chasing for a lot of my life. And um, I was really interested in the opera, um, form, opera,
Mhm.
the genre of opera, and because of the storytelling aspect, and that you could tell stories is so, in such a huge way, and fantastical way, that story would just stick with the person that was there. Like, there's no way you can forget it. Um, and that's what I want to do. I just wanted to have that impact, kind of like how I talked about the impact that I felt that Handel had on that audience.
Mhm.
I wanted to have an impact like that, and tell big stories.
Mhm.
But the stories that I wanted to tell were all based in sort of the European tradition. Like, I
Mm.
wanted to do the first one that I wanted to do was take uh, Shaw's Saint Joan, the, his play about Joan of Arc, and you know make that an opera, set that as an opera, and then it was Rapunzel. I don't
Mhm.
know, Rapunzel,
Mhm.
or it was like a Greek, tragedy or something like that.
Right.
And every time I would try to start one of those, I really would get nowhere with it.
Hmm.
It would always fizzle out.
Mhm.
And so I kind of had a period of time when I just gave up on the idea.
Hmm.
And then um, I I wanted to get back into composing again, and I was just like, I need something super familiar that will just pull me in, and I would have to complete it to honor this thing. And so I picked Langston Hughes'
Mhm.
poetry, because it was like his poetry was the first poetry I ever memorized. It was huge in my community.
Mhm.
It was a big part of my community growing up. And so I did a series of short songs based on some dreams poems that he did, and I was like, that's it, and I finished it, and I felt good about it, and I knew that was the key. Like, the
Hmm.
story really I had to be connected to the story,
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
and there were so many stories that I was connected to that weren't being told.
Yeah.
In places that I thought they had a right to be told, or should be told in, or should be lifted up in. At least that's what I thought at the time. I mean, I
Mhm.
still think that to a certain extent. Um, and 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 I think a lot of the times our stories are being told by people outside of our communities,
Mhm.
and they sort of mischaracterize the people, the culture, the places, and they contribute, quite frankly, to at least for Black people, anti-Blackness.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm not saying that people are intentionally doing that, but
Right.
um, it, there's just certain aspects of culture that you're just not going to understand,
Right.
and if you don't understand them, then you can produce something harmful.
Right. Right.
Um, and so that's why I think that I feel storytelling is really important to me as an artist. Um, I used to think, oh, all artists should be, focused on storytelling. I don't necessarily feel that way anymore.
Uh-huh.
I feel like that's my call
Uh-huh.
to do that. That's my mission.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I feel like um, we just have that spiritual connection that can produce a work that will be impactful and lasting and
Mm-hmm.
true and
Mm-hmm.
truer.
And mean something for your community.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, and honestly, I most of the time I do write for Black performers as well,
Mm-hmm.
because I also think that that's an important part too.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
like it's not just the people on stage telling the story or representing this story and this culture. Um, should be a part of that culture.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and again, I know that not everyone feels that way, but I feel like I do write pieces and music for um, Black people and other people of color,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, to perform.
You sometimes work with other artists and recently collaborated with Leslie Parker on divination tools. Could you tell us more about that project and how it influenced your thinking around a pedagogy of Black improv and electronic music?
Yeah, wow. Well, first of all, Leslie Parker is just a phenomenal choreographer and dancer, um, and I would say educator as well. We were both uh, 2019 Jerome Hill Fellowship
Mm-hmm.
awardees, and so kind of connected through that program. We like to stick together, Mary. All the uh, and so that's kind of how that was the first, like, that community, or that community being a community. That was sort of the first introduction to that, was our sitting down to talk about uh, each other's work,
Mm-hmm.
and we found the connection um, through um, so this idea about water and returning, and we both knew that we were going to Senegal
Mm-hmm.
as part of
Oh,
this trip.
okay.
She was going out there first, so I was just like, okay, let me know what it's like with what I just see,
Send me
and
notes.
send me notes and things. Um, and then she went out there in, I think it was August of 2019, and Karina, my wife, and I went in January of 20, right before the
Wow.
pandemic.
Yeah. Right
Um,
under the
yes, right
right under the
under,
wire.
yeah. Um, and so I learned about Leslie's work during that, those conversations, and we both were sort of dealing with um, sort of the idea of ancestors and how they move in your life, and
Mm.
um, Leslie, I approach it from, and not that I think sort of the spiritual, sort of more religious practice based part of it isn't part of Afrofuturism. It is, because that's, Afrofuturism is like connecting the past to the through the future. But I feel like she was doing it from like a really sort of religious place, where I was coming at it from a different sort of metaphysical space. Both
Mm-hmm.
metaphysical, but mine more cosmological.
Yeah.
Even that doesn't even, I don't think that describes what I'm trying to say. But we were both on the same path.
Yeah.
And, she had seen some of my work when I returned from Senegal, a piece that I did called Our Boat. Um, and that was an improv piece. That was really sort of the first time of me that I was like doing the sort of electronic improv that I'm doing now, which is like the multi-instrumental with like loopers and things like and tracks and things like that. And she was really interested in what that might look like in her work. Yeah, so she invited me to write a. She was teaching at the U of M at the time, and so she invited me to do some work with her class at that time, and then that worked out really well. So she invited me to be a part of Call to Remember, which is like the larger umbrella of the work that she's doing that Divination Tools is a part of. Yeah. So I learned a lot from her and the way she approaches improv, and how, I mean, I was working basically 2.5 years on this with her, and so that long approach to sort of developing a language together, and sort of building this this new language and way and syntax and like, you know, and how that happens in improv. It's not just, you know, jumping in a room together and just playing.
Right.
There is this conversation happening, and in her case, it was between the dancers and between the trio of musicians that we had. Well, actually, it ended up being a quartet. I was doing electronics. There was a cellist who was using a loop pedal and other effects, a percussionist, and a pianist that played together. And first, I was just like, I felt weird because she told me about these players who are this amazing players in the jazz scene in New York, and I'm just like, well, I do electronics,
Yeah,
in the Twin Cities, so I did feel like a little like I have to like.
You got to fit in.
I gotta fit in, and I gotta show them what I'm doing.
Yeah,
because it's gonna be weird, and I know that it's weird, and they're probably not gonna be used to that. So that was a whole nother thing.
Sure.
There was like a generational difference too, which is weird because now I feel old.
Oh,
there is like another.
Oh, they're young people.
No, they were older.
Oh, they were older. Okay, got it.
You know, and Michael was, he was like he was doing synthesizer, keyboard, and recording stuff when MIDI was first being introduced and stuff like that.
Who are the players?
Well, Michael is the one that I was referring to, Michael Wimberly. He played piano and also in congas and drum set. And then he was joined on percussion by Farai Malianga. And Farai kind of joined us later in the game when we were down in Florida State at Mancy this past spring. And then Nyoka Workman is a cellist and amazing cellist. And she does work out in New York under Fiery Strings. We're actually going to do I'm working on some stuff for her.
Oh, cool.
A couple of things for her out of this project. So, but yeah, they were all like, you know, Nyoka and Michael, I know have played with all the big cats out in New York. So I was a little nervous about it. And it was, you know, it was challenging initially for them to sort of see how I would fit into things. But my job was really to create these sort of this atmosphere and ambiance, kind of ethereal moments in a piece, and also to drop in some samples, because Leslie did want, recognizing that hip hop is a huge part of, again, bringing in that futurism,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, so I was kind of playing those roles, which I really liked,
Mm-hmm.
um, to do. It was kind of like what I'm doing in my work now, which is a lot of sound design. Um, so it's like it was kind of like a mixture of sound design and what I thought of as electronic improv.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Well, it sounds like
Yeah,
it went well.
I think it went really well. I think, again, it was something that you could not know what was going to happen walking
Yeah.
in. Like you
Yeah.
couldn't. It was not something that could be described, and so we didn't know how audiences would respond
Mm-hmm.
to it. Honestly, we know that the Walker audience is used to interesting performances
Mm-hmm.
on that stage. So, but again, this was like something really out there,
Hmm.
um, and and that's what I heard from my friends and others. Um, it was something that was remarkable and, in some ways, undescribable,
Mm.
moving, and it felt really good to be a part of it.
Mm.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah.
Are there future plans for that project, you know?
We're going to be in New York. I just got the
Okay.
dates.
Oh, awesome. And what are those dates?
We're going to be at Dance Space in New York. We'll be there October 5th, 6th, and 7th, 2023.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
New Yorkers, mark your calendars.
Yeah.
um, could you tell us more about your project, your water music project, Aquasonos?
Yeah. That's kind of the project that Leslie and I, kind of jived on. I grew up, or still have, as I just took my 5-year-old to swimming lessons,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and watched them, like, really be an amazing swimmer at
Yeah.
5 years old, where I'm still, um, somewhat terrified of water.
Hmm.
I'm better, but the whole project is about, sort of me, taking on my relationship with water, and it's kind of based in an idea, or it is based in the idea of, sort of genetic memory, and genetic trauma, passed to generations. My fear of water was something that I have never not known. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know where it comes from. Other than that, as a child, as a young person, I would have flashbacks or little memories, of, being on boats, and these were like old boats, old sailing boats, um, and I just thought maybe in a past life, I was a sailor or something
Mm,
like that.
maybe.
And then, the more I learned about, again, sort of genetic memory, um, and and uncovering more knowledge about the, Middle Passage,
Mm-hmm.
and understanding all the details, or more details than, I had known, um, growing up. Um, I know that trauma still sort of lives in
Mm.
in Black people,
Mm-hmm.
in this country, who are descendants of people who were part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are other things that are built on top of that, in terms of our relationship with water, and how water is used to sort of separate, people out, either by access to, or where water is dumped.
Mm-hmm.
beaches that are open to whom, or pools, or using pool as a weapon,
Mm.
filling pools with acid, and, you know, all those type of things where it's like, yeah, that trauma is probably there,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so the idea about Aquasonos is like creating projects and sounds and music based on like an understanding of water, building a relationship with water. Part of that was my trip to Senegal that I took in 2020, and it was part of that idea was to sort of take the reverse trip
Mm. Hmm.
back across the Atlantic, and the target was uh, Gorée Island and the door of no return, and
Mm.
actually being at that door where so many Africans had been sort of marched through and put on ships.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very strategic point because it was the shortest distance between um, this hemisphere and the other hemisphere, and so um, yeah, it was. I felt going back to that place and being there, and like just feeling the presence, and would help to begin that process.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of how the project started. And so I've created a few pieces based on that,
Mm-hmm.
and I also just did a lot of field recordings of water
Yeah.
in all different states, um, and listening, doing breaking apart samples, and all of that, just really sort of really digging into to water, putting my hands into water, if you will,
Mm.
um, or submerging myself,
Mm.
if you will, in it, to have a better relationship and sort of heal from that trauma, and hopefully, I mean, seeing the next generation. Um, in the form of Ezra, my 5-year-old, like really loved the water,
Mm.
and I I feel really great about that to
Yeah.
see that, and I love like they don't understand why I love going to. They prefer mom take them, but they don't understand why I love going to watch them swim. But yeah, it's the final the final step in the process. Although I don't know if I'll ever close down this project, will
Right.
be to take adult swimming lessons and pass. Like,
Oh,
so
yeah.
that's the goal, and I hadn't done it yet. This summer might be the summer that I do it
Mm.
because I don't have to travel
Well,
for a lot for the middle of the summer anywhere. So I think I have enough time to take a course. So
hey,
I think it's going to happen.
you just put it out there in the
I
ether.
got to do it. I got to do it. But
Well,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And it really, it was also the thing that about Aquasonos is it was my sort of diving into more ambient
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
music.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of took me to that place because it was also at a time where 2020, with COVID and the George Floyd murder and all of
Mm-hmm.
that,
Mm-hmm.
I just needed something that was so the ambience
Yeah.
of water and air were just so important, and it just seemed so right that I was exploring
Yeah.
water at that time, and yeah, so.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that that project could be so therapeutic for you. I think that's so often the case with for creators, you
Hmm.
know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Um on June 10th, Studio Strange is presenting a sound installation to commemorate the final Northern Spark event. Could you tell us more about that and your new band, Longing for Andromeda?
Yes. Yeah, we're so sad
Uh
that
oh.
Northern Spark
Oh,
is
okay.
oh
I thought you were gonna say there is more bad
no
news. Go on.
no no that
I was
Northern
like,
Spark
what?
is going to be no longer.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's um. So, but we I had been working with Northern Spark for a few years now. The during 2020, their Northern Spark was virtual.
Mhm.
Is that right, or was it 21? It's so hard to remember like those years.
Oh my goodness, it's all one haze of trauma.
Well, the year that they did a virtual, I
Yeah.
think it was 21. Actually, that makes more sense. They did a virtual sort of Northern Spark. They were inviting people to submit ideas on virtual gatherings.
Mhm.
And I had just seen an amazing piece of art by Sage Carroll,
Mm.
who was a ceramicist and, well, really a multidisciplinary artist. I would call her, uh, and she had done this work on with her ancestors actually,
Mhm.
that was that would allow folks to kind of travel through this virtual space, this virtual garden, and
Hmm.
sort of interact with her ancestors.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like a photo album that was kind of living, in a sense. And I was like,
Yeah,
that's
that's really
such a
cool.
brilliant idea. And that was her idea. So I was like, how would I use this technology? And so I wanted to create a sound garden where people would go in and sort of contribute to the sound of the place. They
Mm.
could go to different areas and hear different songs that people had created, and just travel around. And it would just be a sharing place where you can listen or share, musical creation or sound creations.
Mhm.
Um, and it would happen on the solstice.
Mm.
So it's Soul Sound Garden. Um, but when I researched how long it would take to create a space like that, um, and it was going to take too long. It's going to take months to
Yeah.
program that, and so I was like, so I shifted and shifted to an augmented reality project that would sort of be based in places in Frogtown and Rondo,
Mhm.
the neighboring communities that I live in St. Paul here, both that are kind of like being gentrified, but and fighting to maintain the identity and culture
Mhm.
that has been here for a while. And so I thought it would be great to pick places that the neighborhood, loves and loves to gather at, and put little blooms there.
Hmm.
And so that's how I kind of got connected to Northern Spark. And
Mhm.
we were supposed to expand that project this year, and we had gotten an NEA grant to do it, and unfortunately, Northern Lights had to close down, and
Mm.
so we couldn't do that project. Had to give that money back to the NEA.
Oh,
But
man.
my project partners, Sage Carroll and Masoshi Masafu, and I were invited to do something for this final celebration of Northern Spark.
Mhm.
And we had just put together a band called Longing for Andromeda, which also includes my longtime collaborator, Khalil Brewington, on drums. And so we're going to do this installation, sort of celebrating the river. So this is kind of like all points meeting together, like
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
personas and like everything. It's the nexus of all all
Of
things
everything.
of everything. So we're going to do this project at the Upper Mississippi River Landing in St. Paul on June 10th from I think it's 5 to 9 p.m. It used to be an overnight thing, Northern Spark.
Mhm.
But it turns out that spot there is a residential area, so
Yeah,
we can't go past too much past the quiet hours there. But
right.
what I'm composing is a basically a 4 hour like cycle. There's like four sequences of gong, like a gong choir. So
Mhm.
well, a gong quartet. We'll just call it a gong quartet.
I like it.
Um, yeah, it's structured improv. Um, it's to honor the water and water protectors. Challenging others to be water protectors. We're doing it in collaboration with Bayou Bay, who's an artist. I would call him a behavioral artist. But he also does affirmation space is the other work that he does in town. He just had an exhibit or installation at Public Functionary where you just performed not too long
That's
ago.
true.
um, and so he's a part of that project as well, or the celebration. So there's going to be like lights, sound activated lights, a gong, a 15-minute gong sequence at the top of each hour with improv in between those hours.
That sounds really
Um,
cool.
yeah, I think it's going to be fun.
Mm.
It's kind of like this is the type of thing that I'm getting into doing more, which is just more sound installation, larger scale work.
Mhm.
That's kind of the work that I think the concept of Studio Strange hopes to do. Just multidisciplinary projects and installations, and also hopefully a sound house where people can dig up sound clips for your
Really
radio
cool.
show, for your
Yeah.
commercials, or whatever. You
Well,
know,
you just led me right into the next question, which is what is Studio Strange?
yeah, yeah. So it's as you know, Mary, I took a huge leap probably a year ago, almost. Well, yeah, it's been about a year to become a full time uh, creative or artist um, and try to make my living doing that.
Mhm.
um, and and I had to, through the help of folks like you,
Oh, well.
um, and figure out a way to do that and take care of my responsibilities to my family and um, you know. Um, having different or multiple revenue streams seems to be important.
Mm.
Relying on grants for
It's tricky
it's a
business.
tricky business, and it's just like that's not cutting it and making the money. So how do I monetize the thing that I love? And um, Studio Strange is a part of that, or is becoming a part of that. So with the production of actual works and pieces, sound design for theater and dance, and then that sound house project that I'm working on as well, where that'll be sort of an e-commerce sort of venture. And then the other big venture that is eating up a lot of time is actually renting and providing access to um, electronic gear
Mhm.
that I have,
Mhm.
and making that available for, a sliding scale,
Hmm. I
to
hope
people.
people just caught that. Did everybody all hear that? There is like cool gear that you can rent
Yeah,
for whatever amount of time on a
yeah,
sliding scale.
on a sliding scale. And it's, because I know that, you can only get so much unless you want to. I mean, you can certainly go to whatever music store every day and, and play on whatever piece of equipment that you're thinking of buying.
Hmm.
But sometimes you just don't want to risk buying something and having it not work out, or there's this new thing or this gear that
Right.
you're like, oh, I really want to kind of dig into this thing. Like I want to dig into drum machines or sampling, but
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to spend this money, drop this much money on the sampler.
Right. On something I
Well,
don't know if I want to
yeah,
use this particular thing yet. Maybe I want
yeah,
to use that thing. Yeah.
yeah, because as all things, like people have different learning styles and stuff, and you might
Hmm.
want to just figure out what works for your learning style and
Hmm.
how you want to play.
Hmm.
Well, I want to like provide my gear because I bought bad gear before. It's like, why did I buy this? This sucks. Um, or I want people to be able to try it out and give it a test drive and see if they want to purchase it, and
Yeah.
or maybe you just need it for like a project
Right.
that you're working on. You don't want to buy it, but
Yeah.
you want to use it for this amount of time.
Right.
Like I've certainly been there as well.
Hmm.
So I have stuff that that I've acquired over time that I want to make available.
Hmm.
And I also hope to just have some petting zoo sometime as
That's
part of
fun.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I
But,
could even see that in like schools. I don't know if
oh,
you would
that would
bring
be
your
so
stuff for
fun.
kids.
There's stuff, Ezra again, like really, um, I've let them play on like a Roland TRS, you know, um, and they come with cool stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they were much younger than 5 and didn't break it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just imagining, like how experiences like that when we're so young
yeah.
can make such a lasting impression.
Yeah,
Anyway.
absolutely. So that's another, those are things that I'm trying to do with Studio Strange and this um, building it piece by piece,
So
basically.
cool. Love it.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
luck with it.
Thank you.
Um you mentioned to me that you will never write for orchestra again.
Oh
It
yeah.
seems like there's a story there. Could you tell us more?
I just don't that that old love affair with orchestras is just gone. I feel like I feel like the that they're just still such vestiges of like colonial like thinking and I just can't look at them any other way.
Yeah.
I just
Mhm.
um it's I just I don't think they can help themselves. I don't think that, and I know that there's like I shouldn't put the whole you know but really like it's like there's few
That's
exceptions.
right, and maybe that's just the way that that thing works,
Yeah,
And
that's what I'm
like
saying. Like I
it's
just
just a
can't.
thing. Yeah.
And it used to be, again as I talked before, it was like the ultimate instrument at one point, and that was my aspiration. Like this is the ultimate instrument, and I just don't feel that way anymore.
Mm.
Like I the sounds that I can make with a couple of modular synthesizers, like to me is like the ultimate instrument. My
Yeah.
rig is the ultimate instrument.
It gets done what you want to get done.
Yeah,
At the end of the day, that's what matters.
yeah. So that desire is in. I just don't. Yeah, I just don't feel like I. Sometimes I feel like adding orchestra to things is. I don't know, I'm getting all sorts of trouble. Sometimes I think it's just lazy. Like the Minnesota Orchestra is one where I'm just like, oh, you're gonna have Dessa with an orchestra again. Oh, that's so like innovative. Like that's I I just it's I that's it's stuff like that that just like orchestras could be innovative.
Yeah.
Like you could make really interesting music with orchestras that have nothing to do with how orchestras sound now. But like you can't change the instrumentation. You can't, there's just so many rules. And to me, it's like that's such a colonial thing. Like it's just like we will not change, even though it may mean the death of us. We will not change.
Well, yeah, and it really limits the possibilities for experimentation. If
Right.
they're just predetermining the whole setup to begin with. I don't know. Yeah.
What
Yeah.
compose? I mean, okay, I'm not. Because composers, the ones that like to write for orchestras, that's fine. But it's just like so many limitations on like what you can do. It's just like, I mean, I guess everything does, but
Yeah. And there's a flip side to it, that's like the limitations on that side of things opens up possibilities on another side of things.
yeah,
But
yeah,
I do feel like the bigger the thing or the institution or the group, the more slow moving it is and the less adaptable it is.
it's wild.
Yeah.
It's just, um, yeah, yeah. And I spent so much time focused on orchestras, um, and I feel bad that I missed a lot of amazing chamber groups that aren't like traditional string quartets or things like that. And there's some amazing string quartets too that don't play like traditional canon music out there doing really cool stuff. But just there's so many bands that aren't like the bands that we think of as bands. And that's
Mhm.
like to me that's the cool thing. And that's what I kind of wanted to make with Longing for Andromeda as well. It's not a traditional band like
Yeah.
we think. Sage makes ceramic flutes and udu drums, which are kind of like vessel shaped drums. And I play like synthesizers and Roland Aerophone, and we use samples. And Matsushi has an amazing voice, a really cool timbre to it, and then Khalil on drums, or maybe not drums, just like percussion sounds. I don't know. I don't know. We don't call them drums, I guess. I don't know.
Percussion sounds. Yeah.
Percussion sounds. But just not that. Yeah. And it's not, sometimes we play songs. Sometimes we just play.
Sounds.
Yeah. And that,
I like it. I like it.
but I feel so like free
Yeah.
in making music like that, you know, that doesn't have to fit in a box or a genre necessarily.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. I'm with you.
Yeah. I know you are.
Yeah.
You're one of my inspirations
Oh, well, thank you.
out here. Yeah, for sure.
um in addition to all of the creative work that you're involved with on the scene, you're also involved with the creative work of being a dad. Can you share with us how you balance parenthood with your artistic practice and how being a father has influenced your work?
Mm. The balance part is it's it honestly feels easier now that I'm doing more creative jobs.
Hmm.
I feel much more comfortable bringing Ezra to my creative workspaces than
Mhm.
I would ever feel bringing Ezra to the offices that
Mhm.
I've worked at.
Mhm.
Um, over the years, and that's a big deal, to
Yeah.
feel like I can have my have Ezra there, and you know have them feel. Usually, these spaces I've been lucky have felt like community spaces.
Mhm.
Places like Pillsbury. Um, um, when I was working with Ananya, yeah, spaces like that, um, and so that makes the balance easier. There's sometimes I'm traveling more, and that's challenging.
Mhm.
And yeah, I was in New York for the premiere of a piece that I wrote in March, and and Ezra had Karina flew Ezra to Texas to
Oh, wow.
be with our in-laws because she was going to come to the premiere, meet me in New York for the premiere, and then basically right after that, I was going to Mancy with Leslie Parker for a residency there in Tallahassee. So I was like away, and I noticed like probably there's so many parents that probably spend way much more time away, but I mean that was so long for me
Mhm.
not to you know see Ezra, and that was hard, that was tough. Um,
Mhm.
I don't know how people go on tours and not take their family when they have kids,
Mhm.
because I don't think I could do that.
Mm.
Um, but Ezra is also becomes more a part of the creative process more and more. Um, they do get shy about when I ask them to play sometimes when I'm at a rehearsal. I'm
Yeah.
just like, Ezra, especially if I'm doing like percussion, I'm just like, Ezra, you can hit, and then they'll like be like, I'm just like, you do it at home. Come on, do it with me. Like I wanna show them that, also that this is a path, you
Uh-huh.
know? Like you
Yeah.
don't have to sit, like you have the opportunity. And that's the thing about Ezra, that they can see both now.
Yeah.
They can see Karina,
Mhm.
who works works in housing, and for a nonprofit or government agency, and has an office. And Ezra knows that mom's office,
Mhm.
and Ezra now knows that dad's office moves from space to space, or dad's
Mhm.
work moves and it changes all the time,
Mhm.
and that both are okay, both
Uh-huh.
are options.
Right, right.
So that's an influence, yeah. And the way I think about music has changed, certainly, as I teach Ezra about music and sound. Like uh, I feel again, especially over the past, I would say 3 years or so, like the idea of like formalized notation and things like that are falling by the wayside, because I'm just
Mhm.
like, kids don't learn music that way. Like, well, why do we put this
Well,
stuff?
it's
Why
a
do we put
rather
these?
recent notion. Yeah. It's really
It's
interesting.
like none of that means anything. Like Ezra like sings this song and can maybe not be exactly on pitch, but the intervals are like they're tracking that. And
Yeah.
now that they can control pitch better, I'm just like, it's just interesting to me. Like the way we teach music to me is it's interesting, and the way that I want to compose music and communicate what um what I would like to lay out as possibilities is different now
Mm.
that I'm a dad,
Mhm. Hmm.
you know,
Mhm.
because just watching and observing how humans are actually supposed to learn things. Maybe I mean, all people learn things in different ways, but it's really, I still feel like watching little kids learn is an education,
For
and that
sure.
people should go back and watch that every now and then.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
And
so
moving
that,
bodies
yeah.
is okay. We don't have to sit still all the time.
Oh gosh, no. Yes, yesterday I'm like, yesterday I had them at I was doing live sound design for a puppet show for Monkey Bear
Yeah.
melodic puppetry, and I'm solo parenting for the next few days, so they came to work with me,
Mhm.
and I'm basically on stage facing
Mhm.
the puppeteers so I can respond to their actions.
Yeah.
And as they're sitting in the first row seat behind me, and at some point in the middle of like one of the shows, they like put their arm on my back while I'm
Oh.
saying. I'm just like, oh my god, I hope I don't press the wrong. But it also was like I just had to chuckle because it's just like,
Yeah. It's so
that is what
sweet.
it is. My kids
Ezra just
behind
wanted to
me,
touch dad,
and
you know?
I'm their dad.
Yeah.
Yep, yeah, and that's life now, and it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Well, and how cool to be growing up with, all of this exposure to all the different kinds of things that you're doing, and like getting to see
Mhm.
other other great artists and musicians and dancers and artists doing their thing, you know? And because Ezra comes with you to
Yeah,
those things,
and
we get to see
that's
all
been
that.
really cool lately.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Ezra came to see Leslie's piece. Ezra came to see the work that I did with Amp a few months ago, and then obviously yesterday. So excited about the puppets.
Oh,
But
yeah.
then, like the favorite, their favorite puppet show. I was like, Ezra, you can go touch the puppet. Like they're right there. No, no, I don't want to
That's
do
scary.
it. like, I was like, you're laughing the whole time. You're funny. But I
But they
guess
feel
I guess
so
it's like
alive, it's
now
like
it looks dead.
yeah, yeah.
It's just laying there in a box now.
Right, that's kinda creepy, man.
It totally is creepy. And I think that's one of the things I've learned about puppeteering. Like you're not supposed to put your puppet down
Mm.
when you're on stage until you get off stage. Like if you take a bow, your puppet takes a bow, or if
Yeah,
you lay it down, you can't lay it down on a table or it's
yeah.
dead. I was like, oh my god, I never even thought of that. I didn't, that's just like different
It has to
crafts.
be in
Yeah.
constant animation. I went to a puppet show in, I think it was in February,
Hmm.
and it was like, it was a puppet show for all ages, but it was maybe more geared for adults. And at one point, one of the puppet characters dies, and so they do stop animating that puppet. And it's
Oh
like,
yeah.
I mean, I was bawling because I was like,
Yeah.
it's dead. But it really, like,
Yeah.
they seem so alive when they're being animated, and then so not when they're not.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah, and yeah, the cool thing about this is that all these folks were also first time puppeteers, and like
Oh, wow.
the way that they were able to animate their puppets they did such an amazing job, and
Yeah.
that's the work that my friend Domenica has been doing for like six
Hmm.
years, and
Hmm.
um, yeah, yeah, it's cool.
So cool.
Yeah.
Is that your next endeavor?
I'm,
Puppets.
I was supposed to. I think I was supposed to do their intensive in 2020, and I never got back on the list.
Mm,
So I want to, but I think what's going to end up happening is that I'm going to, instead of me doing all the sound design, or I might
yeah.
still be doing all the sound design, but I'm also going to be doing workshops with the new puppeteers about sound design, so they
Mm.
can think ahead. Because basically, I had like a week to work with, to work on 7 shows, to put it together. And if I had a little bit more time, or we had a conversation about what's all involved in sound design and what you can think about and what are the possibilities,
Hmm.
then they can their dreams can even be bigger and their projects can be even bigger. So
Yeah.
that's I think that's what Cheminica wants next year, and I'll be excited to do that because it's such a good thing for the Twin Cities to have
Yeah.
this program.
Yeah. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Um, if people want to hear your music or see you perform or learn more about you or your projects, where is a good place for them to find that information?
Well, I am so bad at promoting, but I'm getting better because that's part of the goal for 23. My website is DameunStrange.com.
Hmm.
You can go there. I am going to do a better job of updating on new happenings, and then Instagram is a good place. My sort of professional or creative site is this Studio Strange underscore. So Studio Strange, one word, underscore. That's the Instagram, and or you can find me on Dameun Strange on Facebook. I don't really
Cool.
post on TikTok yet.
I don't
I'm
even have a
gonna
TikTok. I don't know. I
figure it
don't even
out.
want to get into another social thing. Blah.
Try to do Twitch, but I'm too much of a introvert to do Twitch, I think.
Oh. Well, it's not like you don't have enough going on,
Right. Yeah,
you
yeah. I
know?
can't I can't do I mean, there's so
Yeah.
much that you could do.
It's so much.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah. You don't need to be everywhere. We just need
no.
a few places where people can find out about you.
Yeah. There you go.
So
Instagram.
your
Yeah.
website and Instagram,
Yeah.
and just say the handles one more time.
So Damien Strange at DamienStrange.com, and then Instagram is Studio Strange underscore.
Great. Thank you so much, Damien. I really enjoyed speaking with you on the Sanguine Arts Locavart podcast.
Thank you,
Um,
Mary.
yeah, thank you. It's really fun.
It was very fun. Thanks for having me.